Hello everyone, I'm Lisa Weber Curry, Manager of Clinical Services at Ascension Counseling Center. You're watching Ascension Counseling Center's video newsletter, where we talk about the services we offer and how you can benefit from them. Thanks for joining us. Our discussion this episode centers around cognitive distortions, otherwise known as unhelpful thinking patterns, and how they limit us. Suzanne Hamilton, Director of Ascension Counseling Center, is here, and we will share ways we can change our behavior to avoid these limitations. Please stay with us for the next half hour or so. Our newsletter begins right after this message.
Ascension Parish, a parish steeped in tradition. It's a place where generations of families have continued to enjoy a lifestyle that centers on community living and community celebration. It's a place where we care about each other and we care about ourselves. For more than 50 years, the Ascension Counseling Center has continued the tradition of helping individuals and families change behaviors and change lives. The Ascension Counseling Center.
Welcome back, and thanks for staying with us. Hello, Suzanne.
Hi, Lisa. It's good to be back again.
It really is, and I'm really grateful we have you back here this morning talking about, as usual, another important topic. So this morning we're going to discuss cognitive distortions.
Yeah, and what we're going to talk about is how we think and the patterns that we think. And, you know, what we believe, what we think about ourselves and the world around us kind of determines how we act. So if we believe that we can't do something, we're not going to try.
Right.
If we believe that something is going to stop us, then we won't try to go through that. We won't try to do whatever it is that we're looking at. And so and our thinking patterns are such a part of us that we don't even think about how we think.
Okay.
And
they become a habit for us.
They become a habit. And we begin to develop our thinking patterns when we're children, and they kind of develop and they get stuck over time. And so as we get older, they have the power to help us, or they have the power to harm us. Okay. And so what we're talking about today, we mentioned in the opening about it's not that our thinking is right or wrong, but that it's helpful or unhelpful.
Right.
And so we want to make sure that the thoughts that we have that run through our heads, like tapes that go through our heads all the time, talking to ourselves and telling ourselves what's real and what's not real and what's happening and why, we want to make sure that those are helpful to us and not harmful.
Okay, great. So we'll talk about, I think one of the first things in changing our thought patterns, if they're unhealthy, is being able to recognize those thought patterns when they're unhealthy.
Yeah, absolutely. And so because we don't think about how we think, and you know, we really trust our brains to tell us the truth. So whatever we think, we usually believe that that's the truth.
Right.
And so what we want to talk about today is how we can look at our thinking and identify thought patterns that can help you or prevent you from achieving what you really need to achieve, to being the best that you can be in your life, and to be happy in your relationships, and to be successful on your career, and to raise healthy children. So it really overflows into all areas of our lives.
It does, because ultimately our thought pattern is the opening for how we experience our world. Because if we believe one thing or this or that, that's how we're going to experience things, regardless if it's totally opposite of what's really happening. But it's based on our thought pattern.
Yeah, and that's true. And we've all been in a situation where something has happened, and two people can look at that same thing and experience it exactly differently.
Yes.
Like one person will interpret it or in one way, and that might make them happy, and it might make somebody else irritated, and somebody else mad, or somebody else withdrawn or feeling rejected. And so we all have been in that situation where people have responded to something differently than what we have.
Right.
And that's the difference. It's how we interpret what's going on around us that makes a difference in how we experience the things going on in our lives.
Exactly. So let's get down to the science of thinking about how we think.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. actually done, there's been a lot of research and a lot of studying and a lot of observation done that helps us realize that there are certain patterns that we get into, and that we actually have names for them.
Okay.
Just like there are names for songs on a track on a CD, there are names for thinking patterns.
Okay.
And if you think about a road with ruts in it, and we're driving a car, you know, the wheels kind of tend to fall into those ruts. And it makes it a little bit hard. We have to steer out of them.
Right.
And that's kind of what our brain does too. It kind of develops these thinking pathways and thinking processes that kind of go along the same way, and we kind of fall into it, into those thinking patterns, no matter what's going on around us. So looking at them, we can look at some of these patterns and begin to identify them at work in our lives. And so the first one that we want to talk about is all or nothing thinking. And that means that it's either you really see things as black and white, there's no gray area, it either is something or it isn't something, and there's no in between. And so whenever we have those kind of situations, we kind of think of things in absolute terms. And if something falls short of being perfect, then we see it as a total failure. If something in our life doesn't go well, we see it as, you know, our view is, you know, it's always going to be this way, or it's never going to be any different. If you find yourself using those words, that's one clue that you're having all or nothing thinking. And so if you have roommates and you're not getting along with them, and you think they're all evil, you know, and you can't see any good in them at all. Or we see that a lot of times in relationships. If there's a betrayal, we look at that person and we say, well, they're all bad. You know, we don't see anything good in them anymore. So it's looking at that and seeing that, you know, it's not all one thing and never another thing. You know, we can kind of sabotage ourselves a little bit, like if we're dieting. You know, we have some ice cream. We say, well, I just blew that diet. I might as well have the whole
quart of ice cream today.
So yeah, and those are the things that when we have that all or nothing thinking, that if it's not perfect, then it's terrible, then we kind of sabotage ourselves. And so it makes it hard in a relationship. When you're in a relationship with someone and they do something that disappoints you, then you say, well, they're all bad, or I don't want to have anything to do with them. If it can't be the way it's supposed to be or it should be, or it'll never be good, then when we look at it that way, you know, it can damage our relationships with the people around us.
It can, because we hold everything that they do from that incident on to that standard. You messed up here, so you know what? Obviously, you're messing up here, you're messing up there, you're messing up, and it's really hard to get out of that rut when your thinking is all or nothing.
And we do that to ourselves too, and we become our own worst enemies. I can't do this perfectly, so I'm not going to try, or I can't do it perfectly, so I'm not very good. Or we start judging ourselves about not being perfect. We can't be everywhere at one time, you know. And a lot of times we have a lot of unreasonable expectations for ourselves, let's face it.
Yes,
we do. About how we're going to get all the kids everywhere they need to be, and how we're going to get our needs met, and how we're going to keep up with the house and the car and everything. And there's no way that we can do all of that. And sometimes that also leads to depression in people. When they see that they can't take care of everything perfectly, they think, why try? And I'm a failure. Things are never going to be okay. I'm always going to feel this way. And so it becomes really self-sabotaging for people if they can't.
And it creates anxiety and depression in others. And not only do we self-sabotage by our own self-talk, if someone just generally offers us constructive criticism, we take that and we apply it to all of our life, every area in our life. Oh, well, if she said I didn't do that well, then that must mean I can't do this well. She thinks I'm just this horrible employee. And it just really sets us up for that sabotage that puts us in that depression and makes us anxious about any task that we're given, whether or not we're actually capable of doing it.
And you mentioned the work setting. It's some people are afraid to go for a position or a task, something that they're very qualified for,
Right.
could do well, because they look at, oh, I made this mistake, and they're going to hold it against me, and I'm never going to be able
Right.
to get out of this position.
Exactly.
And so you limit yourself by thinking in those terms. I didn't do it perfect, so they don't have any use for me, or I'm not the perfect spouse, so or I'm not the perfect mom or dad, you know, in addition to
Right.
employee or the perfect volunteer. We're looking at
Exactly.
all of those things, and we're judging ourselves negatively, and we're thinking, you know, because it's not perfect, it's the all or nothing.
Exactly.
You know, and so if I can't give my all, if I can't give 100%, I'm not going to give just a little bit.
Right.
And that really limits us, because maybe a little bit is
It's
all.
just enough.
It's just enough.
Yeah. And I think one of the things we can do is reality check. Check in with that person you think you're not meeting the standards with, or you're not doing the job. Well, check in and see if what you're thinking is actually what that person is saying to you, or is actually their behavior. And that can help some.
And that's kind of a reality check. It really, when we have these unhealthy or unhelpful thinking patterns, it is good to talk about it with other people and get their feedback, because we get so stuck in our own heads that we can't really see
Right.
what is, how our thoughts are going around in a circle, like a little
Right, it's
hamster
on
on a
repeat.
wheel. Yep,
Yes.
just goes around and around and around. We keep looking at our failures and looking how we're not successful, and it limits us in what we try to achieve.
Definitely. Okay, so we talked a little bit about all or nothing. So what's our next unhelpful pattern of thinking?
Our next one, we call it overgeneralizing.
Okay.
And so what that means is that you have one negative event, and you think it's going to apply to everything else in your life.
Right.
So you generalize it. And that's what
Okay.
generalize means. We have one thing, and what we believe about it transfers from that one thing to everything in general. And so what overgeneralizing means is that if we have a single negative effect, we see it as a never-ending pattern.
Right.
We'll say, oh, things are always going to be this way. They're never going to be okay. We think our life is it's always going to be that same
Right.
thing. And so if we have maybe something in our job goes wrong, and then we think, okay, everything on the job is
Right.
wrong. It's not
Right.
just that one thing. Or if
Exactly.
we have a negative relationship, we think all of our relationships, everybody feels the
Right.
same way. And so we apply one negative event, and we
To
make
everything.
it like the pattern for how everything
Exactly.
in our life is going to be.
Yeah. I mean, immediately what came to my mind is, you know, with people applying to colleges, and they get one rejection letter, and they think, well, I fill out the rest of the applications because everything will be a rejection because they said this one thing disqualified me. So you know what? They never think I can change that one thing and correct it and apply it to other universities. In their mind, this applies to everything negative, and I'll never get accepted.
And that's a great example, and it's the same way in our, like, a romantic relationship. Somebody breaks up with us and they said, this is why, there's this one thing about you that, you know, I can't
Right.
get over. And we think everybody's going to hate that characteristic about me, and nobody's going to like me. And so we take that one event and we kind of apply that, we interpret everything else in
Based on
way.
that one event. And I think it's also worth noting, we not only do this to ourselves, but we overgeneralize to other people. If one person does something that didn't fit into what we believe they should do, then from that point on, we see everything they do as incorrect. They don't fit in, and we just kind of put them in that box and never give them a chance. So overgeneralization can happen within oneself, and we can apply it to other people if we don't
Absolutely.
recognize it.
Yes, and so it's important to recognize that we do it to ourselves and to others, and
Yeah, right.
to other events in our lives. So
Right.
if you know, if you're trying to quit smoking and you fail and you have a cigarette, you know,
Mm-hmm.
you think, I'm a failure in this. I'm going to be a failure in everything else.
Right, right. I can't start an exercise program because I
I'm
couldn't
gonna
even
fail.
stop smoking.
Yes.
So you know what? Let me just stop. Yeah. Okay. So we've had overgeneralization, all or nothing thinking. What's our third unhelpful thinking pattern?
Our third one is filtering things out.
Okay.
Where and what we do is we filter out the positive things about ourselves and we just dwell on the negatives. Yeah. And so if we're focusing entirely on negative things about a situation, then we're avoiding anything positive. And you might pick out a single detail and you just focus on that exclusively. Now, most of us, and we do this to ourselves a lot, most of us, when we look in the mirror, our eyes go right to that one thing that we don't like. And we don't notice the things that we do like we like our eyes or our hair or something else, our lips, and something else about ourselves. We don't see that because we only focus on what's negative in our life.
Right.
And we'll do that with our relationships as well. Everything might be going except one thing we ask for that we can't get. We're just going to focus on that one negative thing.
Right.
And just going to dwell on it over and over and over.
And it becomes such a way of thinking that we don't even realize we're filtering out positive aspects of our lives until someone else points it out to us. Someone I see this a lot when you give someone a compliment and say, "You really look beautiful today. Your skin is glowing." "Oh, but did you notice this big pimple on my cheek? It just messes up everything." So we're so used to thinking in that way, we can't in that moment accept positive feedback. It just makes it so difficult.
We can't focus on anything positive. And you might have experienced that as well whenever you do a presentation at work or you do something at church and you volunteer, or you might volunteer in the community, and everybody says very positive things and one person says something slightly negative. "Oh, you could have mentioned this." And that's all we focus on.
Exactly.
We only focus on the negative comment that somebody made, and we don't focus on all the positive comments that everybody else made.
Right.
And we make excuses for those positive comments.
Right.
We'll say, they're just being nice to everybody.
We
or they're
discount
just a nice
them.
person.
Yes.
Yeah. And so we don't even give ourselves credit for the positive things we hear. We just brush them off as being not true or unimportant. So it's very important we filter out the positive and we only focus on the negative, and this is called mental filtering. And so begin to notice that in your relationships. When you get a compliment, say thank you.
Right. No, nothing else behind the thank you. Simply thank you, walk away and say, wow, somebody noticed something good about me, and accept that.
And accept it and begin to look, this is one of the things we advise people to do. Begin to be thankful for yourself. Begin to look at things that you like about yourself, making a list mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, all of the different aspects of yourself. Begin to make a list of the positive things that make up who you are. And then begin to start focusing on those and ignoring the negative. And it kind of takes us back to the first one, the all or nothing. We need to get rid of that. We know that all of us have some negative aspects to us.
Exactly.
And that's okay, but they don't define us. They're not who we are. And we need to recognize that most of us have more positive parts of ourselves than the negative.
I agree.
And that's true for other people as well.
Right.
I need to see them as being more positive than negative.
Exactly.
And even so, it's that mental filter for both ourselves and for other people, where all we do is focus on the negative for our family members or our neighbors, or that's all we can see is the one thing they're doing wrong, and then we're just mad and angry and we hate them, and all of those things.
Right, and it's hard to let go because you've had this going on for so long, and at some point I've heard people stop and say, I don't even remember why I'm angry at that person. But it's that mental pattern that's been playing all this time. But I think something important, excuse me, you pointed out was, if you start to jot down, even in a gratitude journal, the things you are grateful for, you'll start to recognize the positive things in your life. And when you're busy writing down the things you're grateful for, all of your blessings, you have less time and less energy to focus on the negative things.
That's
so I
very
think
true.
that's a wonderful idea.
Yeah, and so we are retraining our brain to begin to think in a different pattern. And one of the things we kind of talk to people is use the stop technique. Like we'll find ourselves engaging in that thinking pattern again, and as soon as we because we do it unawares, almost subconsciously, without thinking about it, and when we become aware of it, we just need to tell ourselves stop, and stop doing that, and begin to focus on the negative, or begin to focus on the all or nothing, where we begin to say gray is okay, the middle is okay,
That's right.
perfect is not good. And so we begin to look at those patterns, and as soon as we recognize we're doing them, to stop them and turn them around.
Right. Because sometimes being in that gray area gives us the time we need to filter out what we shouldn't be thinking about and focus on what we should.
Yes.
So, okay. And so we talked about how we focus a lot on the negative and not the positive, but there's actually a term for when there are positives in our lives, but we don't recognize them, and that's called discounting the positives.
Yes, where we just insist that our positive qualities or our accomplishments don't count.
Okay.
If you do a good job, you tell yourself that it wasn't good enough, or you say anybody could have done that, it wasn't anything special. And that kind of takes the joy out of your life. It kind of makes you feel inadequate and unrewarded. So we need to make sure that we're not just dismissing. So you might graduate from high school or from college. You need to celebrate that.
Right.
Instead of saying, look how many other people did it, you know.
Right.
But look how many people don't.
Exactly.
And so all of our accomplishments, we need to make sure that we're not dismissing them and saying that they don't count for anything. They're not important. Anyone could have done it. So it's looking at filtering out, you know, not just filtering out the positive, but, you know, dismissing it entirely. We need to make sure that we're giving ourselves credit for the things that we accomplish and for the positive things about us.
Right. I agree, because sometimes I hear people say, I started college with my classmates and now they've graduated, they've moved on into other careers. You're still in college, you're still doing well in your courses, celebrate that. We all don't complete things at the same time. You have to sometimes just stop and say, this semester, with my job, with my family, with the kids, I was able to complete one semester of college. That is great. Stop and celebrate that, because I think when we recognize what we have and we're grateful, we're able to accomplish more.
Absolutely. And if we're discounting everything positive about us, then that's one of the things that's going to prevent us from trying things. From, you know, if we don't think that we can be good at something,
we're not going to continue.
We're not going to continue.
Right.
And so, yeah, that's a great example. People in college or people on a job, they look at other people who maybe have in the same position, but they think they're doing better.
Right.
And we don't look at what's positive about what we contribute and what we've accomplished. And it might be that it was very easy for somebody else to get that job, but it was difficult for you given all the bad things that have happened to you in your life. You need to celebrate that you got that job. It doesn't mean that just anybody can get it.
Exactly, because you were chosen. And one of the things I've also learned is sometimes if you see someone else who is able to focus on the positive, you can see that joy in their lives, get with that person. Ask them, you know, how do you show up every day finding positive things when we all can see is negative, but you seem to find something positive in it? Ask that person, how are you doing this, so that you can also learn how to do it. I think that's something good that we all can do to help ourselves.
Yeah, and that's finding people who are demonstrating or living out what we want to have in our own lives.
Exactly.
I think, like you said earlier at the beginning of the program, that the first step is recognition that we're doing this. And so by
becoming
talking about
self-aware.
it, you know, we begin to look at our thinking patterns, and then we can look at them and see what needs to change and how we can make some positive changes.
Right. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. If somebody is getting this right, let's get the help from them.
Yes.
That's important. Okay, and so one final one we'll talk about is jumping to conclusions, which I think each and every one of us is guilty of.
We all do this. So, you know, we jump to a conclusion with very little evidence.
Right.
And like, he's going to reject me, or I didn't do a good job, or so there are several examples of this. One is kind of like a mind reading. We assume that people are reacting negatively to us when we have no evidence of that. And so we're always looking at, we think we know what's going on in other people's minds. And we're jumping to conclusions about what they think, how they feel, what they're going to do next, when we really don't have any evidence of that.
Because we're not mind readers.
That's right, we're not mind readers. And you know, we do an interesting, we've had a children's social support group. We did an interesting experiment with them, a little activity where one child stands in front of the room and the other children just look at them and write down something on a card. And the child who's in the front of the room facing the other children has to say what he or she believes the other kids wrote down. Well, it's always negative. We always are projecting negative things that other people are thinking about us. We just jump to these conclusions that they're rejecting us, they're looking at our bad qualities, they don't like us, whatever. And when the children reveal what they wrote, it's always something positive.
Exactly.
So it's a very powerful way of learning that just looking at people, we assume the worst. We read their minds and we think that they're against us, or they're trying to hurt us, or they don't like us, or, you know. And you've heard people say, my boss doesn't like me and I don't know why. We need to take a look at, you know, is this me doing some mind reading?
Right. You know, or do I need to base this in reality and check in with my boss and see if that's really the case? I think oftentimes people jump to the worst case scenarios to try and beat somebody else from saying something negative. So, in other words, you have the student in front of a few other students and they're writing something down, and you say to the student, you know, tell me what you think they're saying. Automatically, that student is going to say, I'm going to say everything negative so that they don't get to say it about me. I'm going to be the one to say it, and then I can deal with it. When in reality, that's just not the way it is.
It's not. And it's true for us as grown-ups. We're
Right.
just as sensitive
Right.
to those
It becomes our coping mechanism.
Yes,
Definitely.
it definitely does. If I say it first, then it's not going to hurt so bad.
Right.
But we're assuming that they're going to say something negative when we don't. I mean, we're talking about a thinking pattern that there's no proof for, there's no evidence for it. Now, there are some people who are negative, and we know they're going to say something negative because they always do.
Right.
We're not talking about those
Exactly.
people because we have evidence
Not
for
those,
that.
right.
What we're talking about is when we don't know. We really are just kind of making up in our minds that this is what they believe. And we have no way of knowing that.
Right.
And, you know, one of the things is that we do also is that we assume what people's motive is.
Right.
And there's no way that we can know that either.
Right.
And the thing that I've noticed is that when somebody is assuming what the other person's motive is for what they did or said, it's never generous. It's never nice. It's always, you're trying to hurt me.
Right.
And so if we're looking at people, what they believe that other people are going to say or do, then it's usually comes back to this where you have no evidence for it, but you're reading their minds and assuming that you know what they're thinking.
I agree. And I think that goes back to us knowing ourselves well enough to know that there are some insecurity issues, there are some things we need to work on, which are things we can talk about in future programming. But all those are the things when we're aware of who we are and what our thoughts and beliefs are. When those things come into play, we can say, okay, is this really true, or is this just my normal way of thinking that has proven unhealthy in the past? And again, that's when a conversation with someone you trust can really help you figure out, Is this really the way it is, or is this just my unhealthy way of thinking? I think that's important.
Yes.
I actually ran into a situation the other day where somebody assumed that somebody had really negative thoughts about them, and they were, I know it's got to be negative. I don't understand why I was not included. I don't understand this. And my words to them were, has this person ever acted in a way that was counterproductive to your best interest? No. Have they ever made you feel less than? No. Then what is preventing you from having a conversation with this person, testing reality so you can actually find out the truth? When they tested reality, totally opposite of what they thought. So I think it's so important that we communicate with people and find out what's going on.
And you know, one of the things that makes us that way is all our own woundedness and insecurities.
Exactly.
And we forget that the person that we're with, they have woundedness and insecurities
Right.
too. So they're making the same assumptions about us
Right.
that are negative, that, you know, we may be thinking something negative about them. So it's really going on both ways.
Yeah.
The whole time we're with someone else.
That's why having that conversation makes a world of a difference. So give us some other examples. You talk about fortune telling. Tell us what that's about.
Believing that we can predict the outcome of something, or believe
Okay.
how things are going to turn out without really having any evidence about that. And it is believing that things in particular are going to turn out bad.
Okay.
So when we're doing fortune telling, the jumping conclusions type, we are assuming that things are just going to turn out negatively for us.
Okay.
And if we believe that things are going to be negative, then we're not going to try. We're not going to try to work something out. And so if you believe that you're going to fail at a test, you're probably not going to try. There's people who quit classes because they believe they can't be successful. They believe they're going to fail the next test. And so it's really about looking at what we believe the outcome is going to be. Do we always believe the outcome is going to be negative, that things aren't going to work out for us no matter what we do? And that's the kind of thing we're talking about.
Right.
And we all have experiences. All of these things are, belief patterns are interrelated. So it kind of goes back to the overgeneralizing. You might have one failure and now you believe you're going to fail with everything else. And that's what the fortune telling is about.
Okay.
I believe I'm not going to be successful, even though we don't have any evidence for that. So we don't try.
Yeah, my crystal ball showed me one time that I was not going to be successful, and I wasn't. So I'm not even touching the crystal ball anymore. I'm not looking to see if I'm adequately prepared to do what it is I need to do. I'm just going to assume I'm not going to be successful, and I'm not going to put forth my best effort.
People that keep them from enrolling in college or trying for jobs or trying for a relationship that they're interested in. And so, you know, if you expect that things are going to be unsuccessful, you're not going to try. So it's really about looking at yourself, recognizing that, you know, I talked a little bit about, you know, our brain is trained to act in a certain way, and really we trust our brain.
Yeah,
we trust our brain to be right. But sometimes it's not, and sometimes we need to say, okay, I'm going to stop thinking this way, and I'm going to change how I'm thinking. And so it's important when we get to this fortune telling, if you're looking at things and saying it's just not going to turn out right, because nothing ever does, then it's important then again to say stop and begin to list all the ways it could be a success, how it could turn out well.
What changes do I need to make to have it turn out well? I just had one of our interns say to me the other day, well, prior to that, months back, she kept saying, I cannot pass the national teacher's exam. I just don't have it in me. I don't have the smarts. I don't have the study skills. I can't do it. So we started talking about what can you do to get prepared for it. Happily to say, the other day she reported she passed the NTE on the first try. But it's about becoming aware, like you say, about those thoughts and then doing something about it.
Yes, and that's an important piece, the follow-up to look at what we can change is very important.
Yeah.
And the first step is recognizing that we're having those negative thoughts, and then the second step is making steps to change that. And you know, if you use that as an example, once you recognize you believe you won't be successful with that test, then you start looking at all the ways it's going to take to be successful. What are the ways that people have been successful? And there are people you can talk to, there are websites that you can go to for that information, and then begin to take those steps. But if you believe that no matter what you do, you won't be successful, then you won't try. You'll end up stuck, not being able to take the next step in your career or in your relationship.
Yeah, in lots of areas in our lives, if we don't become aware of our unhealthy thinking patterns and realize, okay, what we've always fed our brains, what we've always believed, it is within our power to change it, to make it more positive, so that we can get the outcome in life that we want. I love the quote that you added, if nothing changes, nothing changes. I truly believe that, and I said that to someone one day, and they were like, what does that mean? And I said, I'll let you think about it for a while. And they thought about it, and it really took them a while to get it, but it's so true. If we don't begin to become aware, change our unhealthy thinking patterns to healthy ones, then nothing will change.
And some of those unhealthy thinking patterns come from outside of us.
Right.
They come from parents or peers or other
Definitely.
kids that'll call us stupid. Some parents will tell their children they can't succeed.
Yes.
We hear negative messages all around us, and so it's really important to recognize whether that voice that's telling us we can't succeed is coming from outside. Is that a ghost from outside of me?
Right.
Or is that really me believing that?
That's
and so
right.
we need to change that, recognize that some of the negative messages that we've talked about today are a result of other people putting that into us and not
and we
letting
bought
them
into it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Recognizing
and
that's
so easy to do that as a child, because ultimately our parents, when we're growing up, really help define who we are. So if you're saying something negative to me, then I'm taking that in. But I also think the other side of that is as we grow, we have to assume responsibility of our own thought patterns.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's what today is all about. We're hoping that as a result of this program that you'll be able to look more at your thinking patterns and look at whether or not they're healthy and unhealthy. We don't even look at right or wrong. It doesn't matter if they're right or wrong. What matters is whether or not they're helpful to you in your life. If they're unhealthy, then you're going to be sad, depressed, disappointed, frustrated, and stuck. If they're healthy, then you're going to grow, you're going to take chances, you're going to expand your world, and you'll have a lot more opportunities that will come your way, and you'll be able to take advantage of them.
And you'll start to attract healthy people who have healthy things to say about you. Yeah, that's so important. So we'll go over our checklist of cognitive distortions one more time for everyone, our list, and give them a brief explanation to make sure everybody's clear about it. So we talked about 5 of them today.
Yes.
Okay.
We talked about 5 of them. The first one is all or nothing thinking, and that's where you look at things as in absolute terms. It's either black or white categories, and there's nothing in between. And the second one is overgeneralizing. Something happens to you one time, and you think that's how your entire life is going to be. Everything is going to be that way because it happened one time in this area. So now it's going to happen in my relationships and my job and my volunteer work. The third one was mental filter, and we talked about how you filter out any positive things that happen in your life, and all you do is dwell on the negative. And it doesn't matter if the negative is one tiny little piece and you get a lot of other positive feedback. We just don't pay attention to the positive. We only focus on the negative. And the flip side of that is the fourth one, where we discount any positive things that happen in our life. We make excuses for them, and we say, anybody could have achieved this. I'm not special in any kind of way. We look at the positive things that happen, and we treat them as if they don't matter or that we don't deserve them. And then the fifth one is the jumping to conclusions. And that's the things like mind reading, where you assume you know what the other person is thinking, and fortune telling, where you believe that things are going to, you project a negative outcome for what it is that you're thinking about. So we invite you to spend some time thinking about these 5 different ways of thinking. Think about your thinking.
Exactly.
And take steps to change it. Write things down, journal them, talk with other people, get some feedback from others, and begin to notice those patterns and start making active changes to change them.
And remember, gray is the new black.
Yes.
So instead of falling in black or white, we're going to be in gray. Gray is our new color. It's safe to be there until we can change our unhealthy thinking patterns to healthy ones.
That's right.
Okay. This was such great information, Suzanne. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, and I hope everybody gets something out of that can be helpful for them.
I'm sure they will, because I did as well.
Okay.
Thank you. And thanks to you, our viewers, for spending your time with us for this episode of Ascension Counseling Center's video newsletter. Remember, you can catch replays of the program exclusively on Ascension 21 on the days and times listed on your screen, and anytime on Ascension 21's YouTube channel. We hope today's information will help change your life for the better. That's our goal at Ascension Counseling Center, for our programs to help change lives. Remember, Ascension Counseling Center is here by way of your support. We're funded by a 2-mil property tax millage, which means that $2 from every $1,000 you pay in taxes goes to support our agency, so we can provide free and low-cost mental health and substance abuse outpatient services to residents of Ascension. We're located in Gonzales at 1112 Southeast Ascension Complex Boulevard, off Worthy Road, across from the courthouse and next to the health unit. You can reach us by calling 225-450-1016. You can also find us on the web at ascensionparish.net/MH and on Facebook at Ascension Counseling Center. You can also hear us on KKAY AM 1590 every Tuesday from 10 to 10:30 a.m. Thanks for your support, and until next time, from everyone at Ascension Counseling Center, thank you for watching.